There you go, so there's the sole in place and there's the boot as it looks inside out. The fleecy bit inside where your foot's going to live. Oh, it's nice and soft. Lovely. Okay, so I'm going to pop that just to one side. Obviously you're going to do that with both boots. You'll end up with two linings looking like that. And then we're going to go back to our outers and grab the soles that we made with the non-slip fabric, just removing elements of fluff from everywhere. And right, and then what we're going to do is exactly the same again with the sole. So turn this inside out. Okay, and then you're going to do the same. So you're going to take the sole, this is the right side, the side with the non-slip, and you're going to put that right sides together with the printed fabric, and matching up the notches as you go round, you are just going to clip the sole to the cotton, or pin the sole to the cotton, and then sew it on all the way around, just like we did with the lining of the fleece lining, with the sole of the fleece lining. There's my toe notch there. I'll match that up to begin with. And now this is where you can see where you cut around that foot band, it's allowing you to attach the sole nicely, because it will curve round, and where you've snipped into it, it's just allowing that to sit there like so around that curved edge of the sole. So first of all match up the notches and then walk round the rest of the pieces. So there's the heel notch there. And again, where you've snipped into it at the back, it will just help travel round that curve, and you're going to sew just to the inside of the line that you did. Those seam allowances can be open. There we are. So as you can see, I have put quite a few wonder clips on there, and you can see that that's just been clipped all the way to the edge, and where you've got your heel area, the snips have helped you come around this curve, and again on the toe area, those snips have just helped you get around that curve there. So we're now going to sew the sole on to the boot. So I'm ready to sew the soles on. I'm going to work looking at the top of the boot just so that I can check that everything is where I want it to be. And doesn't matter really too much where you start if you're going to come around in a big circle. I'm matching up with my 1 centimetre line there. And round I go. Let's move you around so you can see. And I'm back on a straight stitch now, and I've put my ochre coloured thread back in, or my mustard coloured thread, to match my outer fabric, and I'm back on a universal needle, and round I come, just attaching that sole on. And when you come to the curve bits, you should just be sewing just to the inside of that line of stitching that you did before. And you can stop and pause at intervals and just check that the raw edges are all matching and everything's looking good. And you're just going to continue your way all the way round. And so you should now have your sole sewn on like so. So you've got your 2 outer fabric booties and your 2 lining fabric booties, both with their soles on. So you've got 4 boots in total. Let's take one of each, 1 lining and 1 outer. And what we're going to do is we're going to place them sole to sole like this, and then we're going to just clip or pin all the way round and sew them together. So you can match up this side seam here and pop a clip there, and same on the other side when you turn it over, and we'll then just pop a clip at the toe and at the heel and then come all the way around. And all we're going to do is just stitch together the seam allowance of the sole on the outer fabric and the seam allowance of the sole on the lining fabric, just so that they don't come apart. Once you're putting your foot in and out of the boot, you don't want to be dragging the lining out with you each time you remove your foot from the boot. So you just need to go round, put a few clips in all the way around like this just to hold it in place, or you can use pins if you're using pins. And you can just sew within the seam allowance. These stitches aren't going to be seen on the outside, you're just really sewing within the seam allowance, just to attach the 2 together. And if you find that tricky, because you have got quite a few layers there and you've got a bit of fluff as well, so if you do find that a bit tricky, then you can actually even do this bit by hand if you want. So you can just go round and just kind of tack those 2 layers together if you find that a bit easier, because all you're really doing is securing the 2 layers together. And then what we'll do is we'll turn it all right sides out so that you've got the lining inside the boot. So the lining and the boot is clipped together all the way around within the seam allowance around the edge of the sole, and we're now going to sew those together. And if you do find this tricky because of the layers that you're dealing with, no problem, you can do this bit by hand, and I think it would just work fine. All you're really wanting to do with this stage is to attach together the sole and the outer. And hopefully you can see what I'm doing here is I'm just sewing to the inside of that initial line of stitching. So I'm just sewing both layers together through by attaching the seam allowances, and yeah, just attaching the fleece lining to the outer fabric. I increased my stitch length a little bit, so I'm just using a straight stitch and I'm using a stitch length of 3. All of these stitches will just be contained within, and at intervals with the needle down I'm just kind of lifting up the foot and checking that nothing's getting caught, especially around that toe area. Okay, so that's now attached together just by sewing together the seam allowances. We can now turn that through. So just put your hand into the lining side and pull everything through. So you will end up with an inside out boot. There you go. Just check that's all okay. Ah, a nice fur boot. So that's your boot inside out. What you're going to do now is just match everything up around these top edges. Oops. And then we'll just do a stitch all the way around the top edge just to hold those in place before we bind the top edge. So I can see there's my my side seams. Put a clip in there. Do the same on the other side. Match up those side seams. So I'm just pressing the seam allowance open and flat and matching that up with the seam allowance on the fluffy lining. Then we need to match up the centre back. I've got my pink chalk mark there, my pink chalk mark there, which I can see is next to, or my little notch that I snipped into, which is next to that pull loop at the back. So just kind of matching. You might need to roll this out a bit, it's a bit rolly, this fleece, so just roll it out so that the raw edges are matching, and put some clips all the way around the top edge of the boot. I was just thinking, actually, with the creation of this lining, you may want to do that on an overlocker if you're pretty good on an overlocker, and that might kind of help with the containment of some of the extra fluff that you get with this fabric. I'm looking forward to this all being contained. There's my pink mark and there's my notch at the front. So however you sort of transferred those pattern markings, it doesn't matter whether you did the tabs or you cut the notches. So I'm just going to make this all nice and even round the top with a few clips, and then I'll just sort of baste in place before attaching the binding, just to make it easier. There we go. It's a nice, warm, looks like kind of a boot for a Yeti. Nice warm cozy boot there. Okay, so I'm just going to go round and just sew round that top edge. So for this I'll take off my free arm, and I shall just post the bootie under the, under like that. Want to kind of match those raw edges up with the edge of my foot. This stitch is going to be eventually hidden. It's just there to hold everything in place, to make life a little bit easier when you come to the next stage, which is attaching the binding around the top edge, which is the last nearly the last bit. If I stroke that fluff back there, I can see there's my raw edge there and there. It's all together. And what we'll do is once we've done this, we'll just trim those edges so it's all nice and neat for the binding to go onto. There we go. What I did, look, when I was coming round, I forgot to pull this grosgrain tape out of the way, and do you know what? I did exactly the same thing on the first pair of these. So I thought, do you know what, rather than unpicking, I will first of all show you so that you don't make the same mistake. I'm going to just quickly unpick that bit now. So yeah, when you come to do that line of stitching, just probably, I think a good idea would be to either try your best to remember when you come to that back bit that your tape should be out of the way, or just pop a clip holding it down, or just, you know, put a pin in there, or do something so that it's held out of the way. or you know, however you find it's best to remember, or hold that down out of the way. Because I did that, I did exactly the same mistake on the first pair, and did I learn from my mistake? No, evidently not. So I'll go back over that bit now, and then we'll crack on with the binding.